Well, we're halfway through the very short election season. A massive rally was held in Edmonton where Stephen Harper introduced Pierre Poilievre. More information has emerged about foreign interference and the polls showing surprising results. Here to chat about it all is federal political commentator Brian Lilley of the Toronto Sun. Brian, hello, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
As always, it's a pleasure. Okay, so Brian, another massive rally for Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, this time in Edmonton. That was Monday evening. So more than 10,000 people showed up to this thing, and some estimates even say as many as 15,000 attended. So former Prime Minister Stephen Harper introduced Poilievre and said that he's the only person to have hired both main party leaders, and his choice is Poilievre. So does Stephen Harper's endorsement actually matter in this?
Well, I think it still does. There's a lot of voters who have fond memories of Stephen Harper's time in office, that he was able to, as he said, he was the actual guy that shepherded Canada through the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. He kind of smirked when he said that line and said, I hear there's another guy claiming to have done this, meaning Mark Carney, and then said, look, I'm the only person to have had both of them work for me, and I fully endorse Pierre Poilievre. He went over why he thinks Poilievre is the best man for the job, that he's got the better policies. As I've been pointing out, Jeanette, you know, I hear some folks say, well, Mark Carney's an economist, so he must know what he's talking about. Well, Stephen Harper's an economist as well. And you know who else is an economist? Peter Navarro. Now, maybe you don't know the name Peter Navarro, but he's got an economics degree, a PhD from Harvard University. I'd say that's equivalent to having a PhD in economics from Oxford, Harvard and Oxford, two of the most esteemed academic establishments around the world. Well, Navarro is one of Donald Trump's top economic advisors, and he is talking about tariffs nonstop and backs tariffs. So does Kevin Hassett, who is also in the White House, has a PhD in economics from the University of Pennsylvania. You can go down the list of Trump's economic advisors with PhDs who still back tariffs, or people like Howard Lutnick, who's multi-billionaire, who backs tariffs. We generally think of these tariffs as a bad idea in Canada, but the fact that you have a PhD in economics doesn't mean that you're immune to bad ideas. Mark Carney has a lot of bad ideas in terms of leaving natural resources in the ground, not building pipelines, keeping emission caps in place, et cetera. So Stephen Harper's endorsement, I think, really matters. And look, whether it's 10,000 or 15,000, in my time covering politics, which stretches 25 years at this point, I've never seen a rally of that size. That is absolutely massive in Canada. In the United States, we'd say, oh, that's nothing. But that's massive. And you can say, well, it's in Alberta, so it doesn't matter. It's in Edmonton, Redmonton, where the
Yes,
Liberals
where the
have a seat.
NDP dominates.
The NDP have two
Yes.
seats, where they're expected to potentially pick up more because Alberta's
Mhm.
gone from 34 to 37 seats. So the fact that he's drawing crowds of that size doesn't matter where it is. It's incredibly impressive. And Stephen Harper's full endorsement, I've shared it, the full video on all my socials. If you haven't watched it yet, make sure you do. The
Mhm.
10-minute speech introducing Poilievre, very well worth the watch.
That is so interesting. Okay, so one of the key points that Harper made was that most of the economic problems that Canada faces predate Donald Trump and have nothing to do with the American president. And this is something that you've talked about, Brian. So is this something you think most voters understand?
Well, I think it depends on who's voting. As we look at the polling, we'll talk about the generational gap in a little bit, but you've got one group of voters that is just obsessed with Donald Trump and the tariffs, and then you've got another group of voters who are saying, "No, look, my big issue is affordability, the cost of living, housing, economic issues." So as Harper pointed out, the, the rising crime that we're experiencing is not a result of Donald Trump and the tariffs. The broken immigration system that we have. We used to have the most, you know, widely thought of immigration system in the world. It was like, Canada works. We should all go study Canada. And now it's broken. It's a mess. That was the Liberals. You look at the rising unemployment. That is not Donald Trump. This the numbers that we just got, that predates tariffs coming in. You look at the fact that our, uh, what we earn, our standard of living compared to the Americans has dropped while theirs has increased. That's not due to Donald Trump and the tariffs. That's the last decade. So all of these things really matter. Now, as I said, you've got two sets of voters, one that is just focused on Trump and the tariffs, and one that is saying, look, the country isn't working the way it should, and we need to fix that. So if you're looking to fix what's broken with the country, I don't know how you go with Carney and the Liberals, because he is still advocating a lot of the same policies.
And then while he was still in Edmonton, Polyev announced that he would close loopholes for tax avoidance. And he specifically said Mark Carney's tax loopholes, meaning that he would target the Liberal leader's record on using tax havens. So what thinks you, Brian? Is this fair or not fair for a line of attack?
Oh, it's absolutely fair. Mark Carney's time at Brookfield, he had he had a lot of things that he was responsible for, but the two big ones were two funds. One was worth $10 billion, the other worth $15 billion. This is U.S. dollars, by the way, so 25 billion U.S. total. These were the green transition funds, and Carney set them up. He's one of the founders, so even if he has sold off his own stock portfolio, he's being paid by these funds until they are no longer active, which is going to be many years into the future. And these are green energy transition funds, meaning basically against everything that Alberta is relying on for your tax base. Uh, he set these funds up in Bermuda. Why? Because the tax rates are so low. There's no capital gains tax, there's no corporate tax, there's no dividend tax. These were run out of Toronto offices at the time. Now it would be New York, but they're run out of Toronto offices, but he registers them in Bermuda to avoid the taxes. The NDP has done an analysis that says during Carney's time at Brookfield, he helped them avoid paying $5.3 billion in taxes. Now, look, we can all do our best to avoid paying taxes. We all want to pay the least amount of tax possible. But when you're talking about 5.3 billion, look, I don't know about you, but I'm doing my taxes at the moment. So I've got a regular income from the sun, I've got freelance income that I've got to account for, and I've got to make sure that every single deduction that I'm making is, by the book, that I am not doing anything that's going to get me audited. And I have been audited by CRA, and I have been told, no, you're paying back thousands of dollars that my accountant had said I, didn't have to pay. These are the things that small business owners, that everyday Canadians worry about. And meanwhile, Carney is registering in offshore tax havens and avoiding billions in taxes while running a very successful company that he recently moved the headquarters of from Toronto to New York. So, don't tell me you're Captain Canada when you're avoiding taxes and you're moving your headquarters from Canada to the United States.
And then on Monday, federal government officials gave another update on foreign interference, and they revealed that the Chinese government has been working to make Mark Carney look good. So, Brian, what can you tell us about this?
So there's a social media platform that is popular in China and amongst the Chinese diaspora, including here in Canada. It's called WeChat. Think of X and Facebook put together. It is everything, and people share stories on this all the time. The Canadian federal government, I need to, just stress this, because I've had some people saying, why is Brian Lilley making up things? Why is he saying that this happened when it didn't? No, federal government bureaucrats, these are not political staffers, bureaucrats, said that there were coordinated campaigns. Now, the term they used was targeting, Jeanette. Now,
Yeah,
in intelligence circles, that means that it's some kind of negative attack on you.
right.
A- and so it may sound like, well, they're out to get Mark Carney. The only examples that the federal officials provided were positive stories on Carney. And when reporters, I was not there, but reporters from National Post, Globe and Mail, and elsewhere said, I don't know, this looks like they're supporting him. Look at all these positive stories. Where are the negative ones that you're saying are there? Oh, we don't want to share those. We don't want to spread that misinformation. But they were willing to share the positive ones about Mark Carney. Going back to the Liberal leadership race, there were attempts by the Chinese government, and these were cited by federal officials at the time, to target Chrystia Freeland, to say, don't vote for her. And when you look at some of the ridings with the highest concentration of Chinese Canadians, those are the ridings where Mark Carney won with the highest percentage of the vote, and Chrystia Freeland was down at like 4-5% of the vote. He won in a landslide. I'm not saying that China orchestrated this, but they clearly are favoring him. And in the general election, they're putting out stories about how he's the strong man, he's the tough guy against Donald Trump, he is the stable one in terms of relations with China. They are clearly trying to sway the votes of Chinese Canadians, and that has to be concerning. Unfortunately, the federal officials tried to downplay this and say this is only on one social media platform. Yes, the most popular one again amongst Chinese Canadians, which in several ridings across the country, there are some ridings where that's 55, 56, 60% of the vote. And these are the messages being put forward. Vote for Mark Carney. He is our guy. That has to be concerning for every Canadian, especially after 2019, 2021. In 2021, or after that election, Chinese officials here in Toronto were bragging about their ability to get some people elected and some people defeated. China is just once again interfering in our elections in a way that India doesn't have the ability to, that Russia or Iran don't have the ability to. China is much more complex, much more sophisticated in how they do this.
Yeah, and Brian, I'm glad that you brought that up, the headline about targeting, because we saw that as well, and we had that in our headlines as well in our Monday newscast, and it was very confusing how they kind of framed that. So I don't know if it was something that was lost in translation or if it was
No, so
purposefully
look, the
worded that
bureaucrats
way.
don't want to say that they're favoring one candidate or another. They just want to say there's a campaign on this person. Well, there are negative campaigns and there are positive campaigns. And if you can only show me the positive ones, then I'm sorry. The Chinese government is now supporting Mark Carney. And so at the Toronto Sun, we just decided we're not using the term targeting. We will explain it within our coverage,
Okay.
but they are clearly supporting him. And to say that they're targeting him and not explaining it makes it sound like it's a negative thing, that they're going
Exactly.
against him.
Right,
That's not the
exactly.
case.
No.
They're backing him.
All right. Well, thank you for clearing that up there. So we've got Carney now, who's got the Chinese backing him. He's portraying himself as Captain Canada, as you said there, and he's lived a good chunk of his adult life outside of Canada. And as you said, he's got his funds set up in Bermuda now, and he's being endorsed by Donald Trump. So do you think that he's really in this for Canada then?
Look, I think the guy loves Canada, but I think he's got a different view than a lot of Canadians who have lived here their whole lives. He's very much in sync with China. Why Donald Trump is endorsing him, I don't quite know, but trying to figure out Donald Trump is difficult on the best of days. But he is definitely in sync with the Chinese government. He's met with President Xi many times. He was just recently there a few months ago, securing a $276 million loan for his former company, Brookfield, from a Chinese state-controlled bank. That wouldn't happen without the approval of the highest levels of the Chinese Communist Party. He, I don't know how you can claim you're Captain Canada when you are setting up your company in Bermuda and moving the headquarters to the USA and expanding business in China, but not in Canada. Because while Carney was the chair of Brookfield and head of transition investing, so that was what he was originally hired for, and then he became chair of the board. But he still maintained, head of transition investing. So he's directing where the investments are going in the future. He was not investing in Canada. He was investing in China. He was investing in Brazil. He was investing in the United States, in the Middle East, not in this country. Investments in Canada did not grow under his watch. Do we really think that that's going to change? That he's going to suddenly come up with new policies that will, help the country grow in the way that it should? Interesting to watch, and all of your viewers should keep an eye on this. Does Mark Carney ever utter the words oil, gas, or pipelines? He talks about conventional energy. And I listened to him in a news conference recently, He just kept talking about conventional energy. This is the phrase he uses. He does not want to use the word oil. And so he wants to make us a conventional and clean energy superpower. As I've said before, we already are a conventional energy superpower in terms of oil and gas. He wants to make us a green energy superpower. He wants us to invest like he did with Brookfield in all of these green technologies that will not see an extra barrel of oil a day come out of the ground, will not see liquefied natural gas exportation in this country. This is his plan.
Wow. Brian, once again, we are out of time, unfortunately. I didn't even get to ask you about the polls and how it's looking like the younger voters are going more for Poilievre, the older voters are going more for Liberals. I mean, we've never seen that before. It's almost opposite, right?
We'll
But
talk about it soon, I'm sure.
let's do it next week for sure. Brian Lilley of the Toronto Sun, thank you so much for joining us once again today.
Thank you.